Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Tropical Update number 34 on Tropical Storm Fred, Tropical Depression Grace, and Invest 96L. In case you can't realize by that, it's definitely hurricane season. Fred's going to be making its way towards the Florida Panhandle, where tropical storm watches and warnings are in effect. Tropical Depression Grace is going to make its way towards Hispaniola, then Cuba, where tropical storm watches are in effect. And Invest 96L will likely prompt tropical storm watches for the island of Bermuda later tonight. Let's go in that order, beginning with Fred, of course. Fred looking better today, thus it has regained its tropical cyclone status, a tropical storm, and actually gaining a bit of strength as well, now at 45 miles an hour. That tropical storm warning from the Florida Panhandle from Navarre to the Wakulla Jefferson County line. Tropical storm watch from Navarre over to the Florida-Alabama border. Again, we'll have another update out from the National Hurricane Center at 8 and the full advisory at 11. We'll continue to monitor Fred's development, although it's not expected to be anything significant over the next day or two as it makes landfall. Tropical storm force winds going to be making their way towards the Gulf Coast around Monday morning, around sunrise, a little bit before. Going to be making landfall shortly thereafter, and then, of course, dissipating out by the time we get to later in the weekend. Rainfall certainly a big concern with this one. 4 to 8 isolated to 12 for the Florida Big Bend and Panhandle. 3 to 6 isolated 9 for southeastern Alabama, western and northern Georgia, western South and North Carolina. We're also looking at 3 to 5 inches now wrapping up in the Keys in southern Florida. Probably about an inch or two still to go in those areas right now. Storm surge warnings are also in effect from Indian Pass over to Yankeetown in Florida. 3 to 5 feet from Indian Pass to the Steinsachi River. 2 to 4 from Steinsachi down to the Yankeetown. We're looking at 1 to 3 from Yankeetown down to Arepica, and 1 to 3 from the Alabama-Florida border to Indian Pass, including all the bays in between that area. So again, storm surge certainly possible with this storm, although it is only a low to mid-grade tropical storm. Storm surge is possible. These areas are very storm surge prone. Again, a look at those tropical storm watches and warnings down there in the bottom right-hand corner as well. Taking a look at the H Wharf, this storm, it brings the storm up to a little over 45. Perhaps we could see 60 miles an hour out of this storm on the high end if we were to do that. But I'd say probably around 50 miles an hour is the expected landfall intensity for Fred. Again, it's going to move inland over Alabama and Florida after the Florida Panhandle, Alabama and Georgia after the Florida Panhandle, where it will then generally weaken out. Looking, of course, at the models here, you see the OFCI, that's the National Hurricane Center, on the far western side of the guidance envelope of those spaghetti models there. But generally, the Florida Panhandle getting narrowed down. We see the European ensemble very clearly indicating a Florida Panhandle landfall. Again, like I said, we could see a 50-plus mile-an-hour storm out of Fred before it's all said and done, but probably not a hurricane and probably not a tropical depression by the time we're making landfall with this cyclone. Moving on to Grace, not looking good today. Grace is, it looks really bad. There's no wind. Decent amount of convection. Rainfall will certainly be a concern. We'll get to that in a second. But the wind, the organization, the structure of Grace is just simply not there. And anybody can see that. In fact, when I show you Invest 96L shortly, 96L looks a heck of a lot more than a tropical depression than Grace does at the moment. Now, but nonetheless, Grace, a tropical depression, tropical storm watches again for Haiti and the Dominican Republic. We'll see how Grace does with its life cycle. Again, as it makes its way into the Gulf of Mexico, where significant development could occur but may be inhibited by dry air. I'll show you one model where it's going to blow it up here in a second, the possibility for this storm. And taking a look, we will probably see this storm by the time we get to Friday somewhere in the Gulf of Mexico. The question is how strong. But before we get to that, 4 to 8 inches isolated to 15 for Hispaniola, 3 to 6 isolated higher amounts for Puerto Rico, and 3 to 6 also in the Virgin Islands. So lots of rain occurring with this storm. Taking a look at the blow-up model, the H Wharf, taking Grace over Hispaniola, remaining relatively weak, which is supposed to be expected of the storm, and then strengthening the storm very, very rapidly as we enter the Gulf of Mexico. Now, I don't think it's going to strengthen this rapidly, but we could certainly see a Cat 1 or 2 in the Atlantic before we seal the deal on it. And that's supported by the European model here. We see a potential, a wide range of scenarios. We could have a continued tropical depression Grace for the next 5 days, and it doesn't strengthen anymore. As we can also see on the intensity spaghetti plot here, there's lots of people below that green TS line over the next 5 days, still keeping the storm alive, but keeping the storm weak nonetheless. But also, I think a decent compromise between the H-Wharf bringing the storm to a high-end Cat 4, which probably won't happen, but is certainly possible. Probably a Cat 1 on the high end of possibility. More likely what the Hurricane Center is saying, a mid-grade tropical storm here by the middle of next week. With Grace, again, where exactly this storm goes after it reaches the middle of the Gulf, if it's a Mexico impact, a Texas impact, a Louisiana impact, or somewhere else, regardless, it's really hard to get a storm into the middle of the Gulf and then not affect any land areas. So we're really going to be watching the progression of Grace very closely. Invest 96L was just upgraded in terms of odds to 70%. Now, this occurred at 5 o'clock. It's an unusual time if you know anything about when the National Hurricane Center issues updates on storms that aren't yet storms yet. Invest 96L is looking really, really healthy right now on satellite presentation. I believe it has a good circulation to it. It clearly has convection to it as well. And so I wouldn't be surprised if advisories are initiated on this storm later tonight. We'll continue to monitor that. Tropical storm watch, like I said, possibly required for Bermuda. You see Bermuda right there, not too far away from the storm, about 150 miles or so from the center of this invest at this point. And so we'll definitely be watching 96 out for potential impacts to Bermuda. Taking a look at the spaghetti models, it's going to make a loop around Bermuda, kind of. You see it starting off here to the north. It's going to go down south of Bermuda, over just south of Bermuda, and then head back up to the north, sort of making a loop around Bermuda. Like I said, so tropical storm watch certainly in the cards for this storm. Taking a look at intensity forecast, it's going to be nothing too crazy. This storm isn't going to blow up over Bermuda, but it's certainly possible that this storm reaches a mid-grade tropical storm near Bermuda. And so, of course, a tropical storm watch would certainly be warranted. And so we'll continue to monitor 96L for development over the next few days. Taking a look at the overview again, we see Fred making landfall, Grace moving through the Greater Antilles, 96L by Bermuda, nothing too crazy. And then a couple tropical waves coming off the coast here at the end of this forecast with potential development down the road, and Grace reforming in the Gulf of Mexico, which we'll be able to see right now. There it is, moving over Yucatan into the Gulf of Mexico. And if we look over off the coast of Africa, you could see those tropical waves there. So again, just something to keep an eye on here. Lots of development here heading in to the peak of hurricane season. Again, looking at the European ensemble, we can see our storms very clearly. We see Fred making its way towards the Panhandle, Grace with a wide range of possibilities anywhere from Louisiana to the Yucatan. 96L, of course, decent model support with that. And then model support as well for some tropical waves down the line. So we'll be continuing to monitor these storms and others throughout this next week, and as needed, of course, throughout hurricane season. Tomorrow's update will likely be out very late because I'm driving all day from Ohio to Oklahoma. So bear that in mind as Fred makes its landfall. I will be driving, and then we'll have an update out after Fred makes its landfall. And then, of course, on Grace, that's not going away anytime soon. It's the question of how strong it is over the next few days. Sorry for the long update, but there's a lot to talk about. That's all for now. Chris 694, Catholic Media.